Hello and welcome to Nathan Reads the Bible. This is Nathan Gray, your host. This is another episode that is not necessarily me reading from the Bible, but me digging into some of the stuff that I found yesterday while I was reading the Bible that I had more questions about. Mainly, I was interested in the size of Sodom and Gomorrah because I just kind of wanted to gain some insight on how big of a deal it was to destroy these two cities. And I've done quite a bit of looking today, and the best piece of information I found that it just gives kind of the history of Sodom and how we have recently, we think, found it. And from finding it, hopefully we will end up with some answers. But this article that I'm going to read part of is from the Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology. It's right here. And it is talking about a place called Tal el Hammam, which is the name for the site that they think is Sodom. Okay, so this was found by an archaeologist by the name of Stephen Collins. He is one of the foremost biblical archaeologists in the world. In this article, there are a bunch of YouTube videos, and one of these days, when my setup is more technologically advanced, I'll be able to do one of those podcasts where I can show you a video and then comment on it, and then hopefully this will be more interesting. I got to figure out how to do that first, but for now, you got me doing research and finding articles and telling you about them. You can find this article if you just search Sodom and Gomorrah, or what I would do is probably search Tal el Hammam, which is spelled Tallel HAMMAM. My guess is if you Google search that, you would find some information on what I'm about to read you if you want to look up more. Okay, and another thing I wanted to get into was what happened with Lot and his daughters, and possibly why that occurrence took place, because I'll be honest, it was weird. For me, it was weird. But we're going to get into why, and another thing that shows about how bad Sodom and Gomorrah were. Okay, so here we go. Tal el Hammam. In the early 2000s, when Stephen Collins began searching resources for sites on the eastern side of the plain of Jordan, he immediately ran into a problem. Archaeologically, it was a virtually blank map. Very few sites dotting the area had ever been documented on maps, let alone probed or excavated. Eventually, Collins and his team found documentation of 14 specific sites, a handful of them more prominent than others, and one giant, Tal el Hammam. It had been noted in a small 1990 book by Rami Khoury, The Antiquities of the Jordan Rift Valley, as the largest site in the entire Jordan Rift Valley. It turned out that the site had in fact been briefly probed in 1990 until a landmine blew the foot off of one of the workers. This reinforced an already present sense of bad juju of the site among the locals. recalled Collins at a 2024 Cosmic Summit lecture, "You don't go there." See, this is one of the videos I wish I could show you guys. When Collins finally decided to investigate Tal el-Hammam, the enormity of the site astounded him. "I've seen every site in Israel. I know how big the sites are and how they feel," Collins said in his interview with Metaxas. "We pulled up to Tal el-Hammam, and looking at it, I almost didn't realize what it was. It was so big that it almost looked like part of the natural landscape." Not only is Tal el-Hammam the largest site in the Jordan Valley, the site turned out to be the largest continually occupied Bronze Age city in the entire southern Levant. And for Collins, this was a perfect fit. He had already proposed, based on the biblical account alone, that Sodom must have been the largest Bronze Age city north and east of the Dead Sea. Sodom, after all, is a key controlling site featured repeatedly in the patriarchal narratives. It is the first and key city in the sites of the Genesis 14 four-army Mesopotamian juggernaut. Sodom, along with neighboring Gomorrah, is the only regional city described as being plundered by these invading forces. Sodom is repeatedly referenced as a landmark location. It's the only one of the cities of the plain mentioned by itself in the biblical account, and the king of the city, Bera, is the only one who has a voice who is quoted. Perhaps most notably, Sodom is actually included in the Genesis 10 Table of Nations, together with the likes of the great cities of Mesopotamia. In 2005, Collins and his New Mexico-based team, led by Trinity Southwest University, together with Veritas International University, under the auspices of the Department of Antiquities of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, began excavations. Today, after 16 seasons of excavations, we have a much clearer picture of this Bronze Age behemoth and its sudden and shocking collapse. Okay, so here's an infographic that I'm gonna show you that gives an idea. If you look at that, here we go. If you look at that for a minute, you want to pause it and zoom in and read some of this stuff. I'm going to get into, I'm just going to read this from the top, the small. Tal el-Hammam is one of the largest and most significant Bronze Age sites in the entire southern Levant. It is situated at the far eastern side of an alluvial plain located at the southern end of the Jordan Valley. Though much of the site still remains buried, we now have a good impression of the general layout and key features thanks to 16 seasons of excavations and probes carried out across the site by Dr. Stephen Collins and his Tal el-Hammam excavation project team. Using the drawings of Tal el-Hammam site architect Dr. Lean Rittmeyer and artist Balazs Below, AIBA artist Julia Goddard created the following illustration of the Middle Age site that I just showed you. One of the points on this site is this gatehouse here. This is the gatehouse where Lot was when the two angels showed up. So it was very large for its time. And I'm sorry that this is as technologically advanced as the podcast has gotten, but I'm doing my best. So this place was well watered everywhere. Besides the nearby Jordan River in ancient times, a gushing water source whose banks overflowed seasonally, Tal el-Hammam was surrounded by perennial springs, with water disgorging from the Transjordan aquifer and coursing down from the adjacent eastern mountains and wadis. Tal el-Hammam even had both hot and cold springs located within its walls, the Arabic name of the site meaning mound of hot baths. Collectively, this befits the description of the area as one that was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, Genesis chapter 13, verse 10, and makes it all the more inexplicable that the site suddenly ceased to function for 700 years following the Middle Bronze Age. 700 years it didn't have anything going on after this disaster that happened. The upper city, the elliptical upper city, rises 33 meters above the lower tell and stretches out for some 400 meters. It contained a 52-meter long grand red plastered palace, which is believed to have originally stood 4 to 5 stories high, with a footprint comparable to that of the White House. So this place had quarters for its king that was comparable to the size of the White House of today. So this place was no joke, man. The lower city, Tal El Haman's lower city, rises 30 meters above the plain and stretches out in roughly elliptical shape, a kilometer long and up to 500 meters wide, encompassing an area of nearly 65 acres. In the center of the lower city was a prominent temple with 3-meter thick walls and an adjacent 60 by 20 meter administrative building. Dwellings populated the lower city. The biblical description of Lot's house as freestanding, Genesis 19, verse 4, is an indication of special wealth and privilege. Typical dwellings in ancient cities had shared walls accessed by a single street. Evidence of freestanding street-surrounded housing had been discovered at Tal El Haman. Gatehouse. Here I'm going to get into this gatehouse again. Tal El Haman's Middle Bronze Age gatehouse complex is 21 meters wide with a 2-meter wide thoroughfare formed between 2 inner towers and framed by 2 additional even larger outer towers. The gatehouse is an unusually lavish pillared Minoan Cretan palatial style, as Dr. Lean Rittmeyer observed the same year in which it was found, 2012. The main and only gate of Tal El Haman has been found. If Tal El Haman is Sodom, then this is the place where Lot sat in the gate. Genesis 19, verse 1. Scoop the gatehouse had stone bench seating. Fortifications. Tal El Haman boasted some of the most extraordinary defenses in the world at that time. Immediately identifiable are the 35-degree ramparts of the upper and lower city. These are unique in that rather than being constructed of earth, they were made almost completely of sun-dried mud brick, tens of millions of them. A 4 to 5 meter thick, 2.5 kilometer long wall wrapped around the lower city with towers spaced at 50-meter intervals. Okay, so that lets you know that this was a big place. Welcome to Sodom. Tal El Haman, including its adjacent suburbs outside the city walls, covered an enormous area of about 300 acres. Within this area, the elliptical walled lower city, albeit still raised about 30 meters above the plain, as I just talked about, stretched out more than a kilometer long, encircling nearly 65 acres. A massive angular ramparted upper city rises up from the landscape like a building in Star Wars, but it rises by another 33 meters again. It contained a 4 to 5 story royal palace complex, like I was talking about, that was slightly larger than the White House, said, and it was Stephen Collins that said this in a 23 interview with Sean McDowell, who I do not know. It wasn't just one big site, he went on. It was one big site with a whole lot of towns and villages, so it's really a major city-state. You could put about 6 or 7 bad edras inside the city wall of Tal el Hammam. In fact, Bad Edra wouldn't even be large enough to qualify as one of the bigger satellites of Tal el Hammam. Tal el Hammam's city defenses were extraordinary. The city boasts the very first Middle Bronze ramparted fortification system in the entire southern Levant, and its 35-degree rampart is the only such known fortification system made almost completely of sun-dried mud bricks, like I was talking about, to the tune of somewhere between 40 and 60 million of them. That's expensive, it's time-consuming, and nobody else did it, said Collins in his Cosmic Summit lecture. Every other Middle Bronze fortification system after this is built of rammed earth. Additional defenses included towers spaced at 50-meter intervals around the 2.5 kilometer city wall, and the walls themselves up to 5 meters in thickness. That the city was lavish is an understatement. It had quite literally hot and cold running water derived from 2 springs, one warm and one cold, located inside the city. The site's Arabic name means Mound of Hot Baths. Tal el Hammam also boasted a large pillared city gate complex constructed in the Minoan palatial style. This is Collins' most prized architectural discovery. Archaeologists are always looking for the city gate complex, and Sodom's is actually mentioned in the biblical account. Genesis 19 verse 1 describes Lot sitting within the gate when he was met by the angels. And true to form, stone bench seating was found within the gatehouse. In the words of site architect Dr. Lean Rittmeyer in 2012, when the gatehouse was first discovered, the main and only gate of Tal el Hammam has been found. If Tal el Hammam is Sodom, then this is, like I said earlier, this is the place where Lot sat. Okay, so I just reread everything that I read you guys, but that's okay. Lot's choice to move into the alluvial plain and even establish himself with his own private house within the mighty city would have seemed a no-brainer. Now, he did respect Abraham. Let's not criticize Lot for being too greedy and taking the best land, which, by the way, he did. Collins told McDowell, "It is the best watered agricultural land in the region. You don't need rain. You have the Jordan River. Plus you have a massive amount of water disgorging from the Transjordan aquifer into that area. Springs run out all over the place there to this day." The fact that this city was so perfectly situated and equipped to thrive is precisely what makes it all the more unusual that partway through the Middle Bronze Age, the continuous occupation of the idyllic city suddenly and violently stops and would not resume again for another 7 centuries. So like I said, 700 years later, this place was just abandoned. 700 years. This occupational gap was noticed by Collins and his team almost immediately. Archaeological excavation showed that the site exhibited no layers or remains from the subsequent Late Bronze Age. The same was true of the immediately surrounding sites. What happened to this area? A clue came... What happened? A clue came early on as the team cut a probe through the first millennium BCE Iron Age remains, which immediately transitioned to an early 2nd millennium BCE 1.5 meter thick bronze ash and bone-strewn destruction matrix. A volunteer plucked out of it a peculiar piece of pottery. It had a glassy surface and appeared to be glazed, yet glazed pottery only emerges from the Islamic period onward, some 2,500 years later. What was it doing in the Middle Bronze level? Furthermore, the glassy surface had oozed beyond the break in the pottery before solidifying, seemingly the product of some kind of brief superhot flash heating. Collins tossed the piece up out of the probe to another member of the group, old-timer Gene Hall, who, as chance would have it, had served as part of the World War II Manhattan Project. The 1945 Trinity detonation in New Mexico of the world's first atomic bomb. This looks like Trinidite, Hall said, referring to the phenomenon of melted sand created by the atomic blast. Remember I was saying yesterday that some people have said that some of the stuff found in... There you go. Collins brought the exemplar piece back with him to the New Mexico Technical Institute for analysis. Without explaining its provenance, he gave it to the lab analyst. "Nice piece of Trinidite," she said casually as she took it from him. "Where did you get it?" Fire from above. This Trinidite was one of many signs of some kind of peculiar destruction event at Tal El Hammam. Destroyed pottery with surfaces melted onto glass, melted bricks, melted plaster, massive quantities of ash, scorched remains of people and vessels, not just strewn at random, but directionally oriented in some sort of apparent blast direction. Mud brick structures, superstructures up to 5 meters thick, sheared off at about waist height, the height of the rampart protecting them. The fragments of one particular vessel, which had a very unique design, were able to be traced, scattered along a 22-meter directional line across 6 walls and multiple rooms. And this destruction layer contained an unusually high salt content, 6 times more concentrated than the Dead Sea, that the site is very close to. There are skeletal remains that lie as they fell, wrenched and contorted. There's human bones scattered all through the final day ash. Human beings who blew apart before they fell, write Collins and Dr. Latane Scott in their 2012 publication, Discovering the City of Sodom. Here at Sodom, the rocks cry out a catastrophe. What could have caused such a disaster? The answer was ultimately published in 2021 in the journal Nature Scientific Reports as part of the prestigious Nature portfolio entitled "A Tunguska-Sized Airburst Destroyed Tal El Hammam, a Middle-Aged Bronze City in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea," Bunch et al. The paper was the product of 14 authors, including airburst specialists, and as Dr. Collins often adds, most of them not persons of faith. The team presented the evidence that a cosmic airburst destroyed Tal El Hammam. The proposed airburst was larger than the 1908 explosion over Tunguska, Russia, where a 50-meter wide bolide meteor detonated with 1,000 times more energy than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. I can't get up and show you this picture because it's hard to center it, but I'm looking at a picture of these trees that have been smashed by this Tunguska blast. If you want to learn more about what happened in Tunguska, I'll go ahead and bring it up here. The Tunguska event was an enormous explosion that is estimated to have occurred at 7:14 a.m. plus or minus 1 minute on June 30th, 1908, at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, flattening some 2,000 square kilometers, 500,000 acres, and charring more than 100 square kilometers of pine forest near the Podkamenaya Tunguska River. Podkamenaya Tunguska River in central Siberia, Russia. The energy of the explosion is estimated to have been the equivalent of the explosive force of as much as 15 megatons of TNT, 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945. On the basis of historical records of significant non-elucent cloud development in the skies over Europe following the event, some scientists contend that a comet caused the explosion. Such clouds are thought to be the result of a sudden influx of ice crystals into the upper atmosphere, such as those that could have been triggered by the rapid vaporization of a comet. Other scientists maintain that the event was caused by an asteroid, large meteor, perhaps 50 to 100 meters in diameter and having a story of carbonaceous composition. Objects of this size are estimated to collide with Earth once every few hundred years on average. Because the object exploded in the atmosphere high above Earth's surface, it created a fireball and blast wave, but no impact crater. The only likely remains of the object that have been found are a few small fragments, each less than a millimeter across. The radiant energy from such an explosion would be enough to ignite forests, but the subsequent blast would quickly overtake the fires and extinguish them. Thus, the Tunguska blast charred the forest but did not produce a sustained fire. So it was like this meteor came down and blew up in the sky above this river in Russia. And the blast and it's called an airburst when that happens. And so it's thought that the blast that took out Sodom and Gomorrah was maybe the size of this Tunguska blast of 1908. Okay, so the article documented the telltale signs at the site of an airburst event, noting that the destruction stratum contained concentrations of shocked quartz, diamondoids, iron, and silicon-rich spherules, and trace remains of melted platinum, nickel, gold, silver, zircon, chromite, quartz, and iridium, the latter of which has a melting point of 2,500 degrees Celsius or 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Taken together, these constitute textbook signs of extraterrestrial interference, commonly accepted cosmic impact indicators. Airburst events are known phenomenon in Earth's history, which is why such data can be comparatively measured, but no such post-Sodom event is known to have occurred within a populated area, exploding at such a low altitude to cause this kind of regional extinction level devastation. Elements aside, the more macabre remains are the human. One example is a pair of prone skeletal legs and feet, everything from the mid-thigh up having simply sheared away, the hyperflexed toes of which are consistent with either perimortem or postmortem exposure to high temperatures. Another skeleton was found buried in a crouching position, with the hands raised to the face in a posture commonly adopted for protecting the head, as occurred during the violent volcanic eruption at Pompeii. Based on the distribution of human bones on the upper and lower tall mound, we propose that the force of a high-temperature, debris-laden, high-velocity blast wave from an airburst impact incinerated and flayed their exposed flesh, decapitated and dismembered some individuals, shattered many bones into mostly centimeter-sized fragments, scattered their bones across several meters, buried the bones in the destruction layer, and charred or disintegrated any bones that were still exposed, write the authors. Death would have been instantaneous, killing all living things within the area within a split second. Sudden destruction, and even this is reflected in the biblical account. Lamentations 4:6 states that Sodom was overthrown in a moment, in the blink of an eye. As for the continuing desolation of this and surrounding sites, the author credit it to the hypersalinity of the destruction layer created by the blast wave over this Dead Sea zone, essentially coating the cities in a wider region in concentrated salt, making it impossible for crops to grow until rainwater had sufficiently washed enough of it out centuries later. During this period of desolation, certain evidence from the biblical and Egyptian texts show that the ensuing name of the area became Abel, the mourning grounds. Certainly, this is the sense given by Moses in describing the view from the mountains in this area, which looks down on the wasteland. Fallout. Collins, for his part, declined to co-author the paper. He also recommended that the authors make no link with the biblical account. Yet such an obvious connection could not at least be mentioned. As such, the authors made passing allusion to the fact that the destruction event might be the source of the written version of Sodom in Genesis. Chaos ensued. Collins explained the drama in his interview with McDowell. It's the most accessed scientific paper in the history of scientific papers that they know of. This one just went crazy, and because of that, there was a lot of pushback. The anti-Bible folks went ballistic and really pushed back, made all kinds of accusations that the photographs were fake, this was fake, that was faked. Why would these guys do that? Nobody bothered to answer that. Why would you fake any of this? I went through a first peer review, of course, to get published initially. Then, because of some of the accusations that were made, it went through a second peer review and remained published. It passed, and now it has gone through a third peer review on the basis of some additional stuff. And now the editors, I think, have basically thrown up their hands and said, enough is enough. The more you guys gripe, the more you guys try and overturn this paper, the more is demonstrated that it's actually factual. Collins also noted that one of the chief antagonists was an airburst specialist whom he had turned to initially to do the research. The individual refused from the outset on the basis of any possible link of the event to the biblical account. Okay, there's only a little bit left here to go. Well, a couple more pages. Accompanying the secular fallout was a degree of fallout from among the religious community. While the news was received with interest by the general public, there was a significant pushback from within biblical scholarship, based partly on the location and partly on the date of the destruction. See sidebar 1 below. At this point, however, Collins believed such misgivings about the identity of the site should be laid to rest. This is Sodom, he asserts. If it isn't, then by all means biblically tell us what it is. That's a good question, replied McDowell, who has also featured the Southern Theory on his channel. A second major paper has now been published, one Collins did elect to co-author, building on the foundation of the former, entitled Modeling How a Powerful Airburst Destroyed Tal el-Haman, a Middle Bronze Age city near the Dead Sea. Sylvia et al. It's nothing short of a cosmic event, Collins told McDowell. If the destruction wrought at this site, some southern proponents suggest that maybe some hydrocarbon gas belched out of the ground as a result of an earthquake flew up in the air, caught on fire, and landed on the cities. This would be a terrestrial event. That would be the ground belching fire, not the sky. The text clearly says fire and burning stone, brimstone if you like, from Yahweh out of the heavens. It's coming out of the cosmos. It's not a terrestrial event, and that's exactly what we have. I think it's a done deal, concluded Collins, regarding the identity of this site. I don't think it's theory anymore. I just think it's fact. As someone sympathetic toward the southern view, I have to agree. The infamous Sin City and its destruction by now is as good as identified. No longer a theory nor a mere mythical biblical tale, but fact. Sidebar. Dating Sodom's destruction. The date of Tel el-Haman's destruction has been a major point of contention. The site has been dated to the Middle Bronze II period within the early mid part of the second millennium BCE. Generally, the terminal layer is described as dating based on pottery to circa 1750 to 1650 BCE. More recently, carbon dated indicates 93.1% between 1773 and 1627 BCE. Generally speaking, Tel al-Hammam was destroyed within 18th to 17th century BCE. This general time frame, well within the first half of the second millennium BCE, is the time frame broadly attributed to the patriarch Abraham in Jewish and Islamic communities, as well as in many Christian communities. A relatively popular position within some circles, however, says Abraham was on the scene at the end of the third millennium BCE, several centuries earlier. Most of this chronological tension arises from the debate about the length of the Israelites' sojourn in Egypt. Exodus 12 verse 40 reads, "Now the time that the children of Israel dwelt in Egypt was 430 years, a fairly common conservative view holds to an early exodus occurring circa 1446 BCE, derived 480 years prior to the building of Solomon's temple, 967 BCE, 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1, adding 430 years for the descent of Jacob's family into Egypt takes us back to circa 1876 BCE, and counting backward another 290 years takes us back to a birth of Abraham circa 2166 BCE. This puts the destruction of Tel al-Hammam centuries after his death. There is an alternative popular late-date Exodus view, the 13th century view, which would downdate Abraham by between 1.5 to 2 centuries. Yet even this would not be sufficient to put the events at Tal el-Hammam within Abraham's time frame. For that matter, Collins himself holds to what could be called an early Exodus view, albeit slightly later, in the ballpark of 1400 BCE, in closer accordance with the lower Septuagint chronology for 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1. For more on this, see the following articles. I wish I could bring them up and read them, but I don't want this podcast to go on for the rest of the day. So I'm going to finish it up. This is a significant topic of debate explained in our article, When Was the Age of the Patriarchs? Maybe I'll read that in another podcast. In it, we make the case for a roughly 2-century-long sojourn as the correct interpretation reflected by the biblical data. In short, ironically, the standard Jewish understanding is reflected best in the New Testament in Galatians chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Paul notes the 430 years as spanning from God's covenant with Abraham to the year of the Exodus and giving the law at Mount Sinai. There are two different options as to when this covenant is anchored in Abraham's life. Nonetheless, even with an early, mid-late 15th century Exodus date, this would still put Abraham on the scene into the 18th century BCE, near enough in the ballpark to the earliest dating for the destruction of Tal el-Hammam. Questions remain in both dating and interpretation, but for an event nearly 4,000 years ago, the time frames are remarkably close, and certainly for that matter closer to Abraham than the dating of Bad Edra and Numera, and that this general period, the Middle Bronze, 2nd, 19th and 17th century BCE, is the correct one for Abraham, is best reflected in the biblical cities mentioned in relation to him, such as Jerusalem, Hebron, Dan, Shechem, and Damascus. These are cities that we now know archaeologically emerged during this specific period. Sidebar 2. Is Sodom mentioned only in the Bible? One argument against the historicity of Sodom and its destruction is that it is a city known only from the biblical text. People have been asking me for 20 years if Sodom was such a big deal and this event was such a big deal, how come we never hear of it from other ancient records outside the Bible? Never say never, Dr. Stephen Collins said in his 2024 Cosmic Summit lecture. He then boldly announced, "We have found Sodom in the Egyptian records, the publication of which is forthcoming." Collins credited the research that led to this discovery to my good friend Anson Rainey, one of Israel's most highly regarded biblical geographers and linguists, who died in 2011. I'm looking at his excursus on the Egyptian execration texts. On a map. I looked at the map. There's a site called Sutu that could be rendered a couple of ways from Egyptian. It could be rendered Sutu, it could also be rendered Sudu. And I looked at his map, and where does he put Sutu? Right on top of Tal al-Haman. And then I realized that there is this objective case shift from Egyptian into any of the Semitic languages in which you add the letter M, becoming Sodom or Sodom, which is exactly what we find in the Old Testament. So in the Middle Bronze Age Egyptian execration texts, the location of our site is called Sutu or Sodom. But that's not all. In the ensuing centuries, the Egyptian name for the area changed after the Middle Bronze Age. The name for this site changed to Abel. This is on the Egyptian map list from the 18th and 19th dynasties, well documented. Collins continued, the name of our site and that area that we're in went from Sutu to Abel. What does the Egyptian word Abel mean? It is also recorded in the Hebrew. It means to mourn a catastrophe. From Sutu to Abel. What happened to take us from one to the other? There was an event. And that's what the Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology and the archaeologist Stephen Collins. I would hope that he is a doctor. I would think he is a PhD in his field if they're giving him grant money to do these kind of digs. Yep, he's a doctor, Dr. Stephen Collins. I am sorry for not giving you your proper due previous to this, Dr. Collins. Whew, man, I feel bad about that. Honestly, I really do. It is not an easy thing to gain a PhD in your life. So that is what we think we have found. Sodom. Sodom was a big city. It's a big deal to blow that place up. And to have 700 years of no people being there, and it being this kind of site that people consider it's kind of, like the cursed area. It's like people who went there to try and check it out in the 90s got their leg blown off, by a mine. So, I believe what Dr. Stephen Collins is saying, that they found Sodom there at this site. And to get back to what Lot's daughters did to him, you have to remember, when we think about the morality that they had instilled in them, came from them growing up in these cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So, you think about the deed they committed to Lot, and you think, wow, that was pretty gnarly, that was pretty dirty, that was pretty bad. But coming from a place like Sodom and Gomorrah, you're probably a little bit skewed. And, the article that I was reading about this earlier was talking about how, they thought they had found 4 righteous people, but then the wife looked back, so she's out. So that leaves 3 righteous people, but then the daughters commit those acts. So the article that I was reading earlier about this is like, seems like the only righteous person that was really left in Sodom and Gomorrah was Lot. And so God said, gone. The Old Testament, again, gnarly times. Gnarly times. I am so glad to be blessed to be living in the times that we live in today. We have no idea how easy we have it in comparison to even 50 years ago. I know a lot of people miss the olden days and the old times. Things were better back then, but some things were, some things weren't. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you for watching. Please remember, if you're new and you checked this out and you liked it, I'm also going to be reading the Bible a little bit later. I got verses, we got Genesis chapters 22 through, let's hit 27 tonight. Let's do 5, okay? Chapter 22 through 26. Stopping at 27. I'll get that to you later on tonight. And I'll get this out right now, but first I want to pray and say goodbye. Dear God, thank you so much, like I always say, for giving me the opportunity to put this podcast out. Lord, I pray that this podcast is a light in this world, and I pray that this light is reaching more and more people every day. Lord, I pray for everyone that is watching. I pray for everyone that isn't watching. I pray for everyone in this world that they be blessed, Lord, that they might know that you are watching out for them, even if they don't even know it. That you have created a guardian angel for all of us, Lord, and you never stop thinking about us. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for your mercy, Lord. For without it, we would be stuck in everlasting sin. Thank you, God, for this time again. And with that, I will say amen. Goodbye for now. Be blessed. Stay safe. But be a little bit dangerous. Just be a little bit dangerous. Maybe dangerous with your faith. Maybe I'm standing too close.